Well, hey, friends, welcome to AWKNG's Ask a Scholar podcast. This is where you, the everyday Christian, can get your questions about the Bible answered by a biblical scholar. I'm Carla.
And I'm Mike, and we're both glad that you decided to join our discussion. So let's dive in.
Well, welcome everyone to episode 36. We are really excited to have Dr. Carol Kaminski back with us. I want to encourage you, if you did not listen to the first episode where she answered lots of great questions specifically on the genealogies happening in First Chronicles, make sure you go back and listen to that. It's going to really help set the stage for these books. And we're excited to have her back. So Dr. Kaminski, welcome. Thank you for joining us again.
Great to be back.
Awesome. Well, now that we kind of know who you are a little bit, we're going to jump straight into questions so we can have as much time as possible for content. And the first question that we have today comes from a student that says, I have always been confused as to why God punishes only Uzzah in First Chronicles 13. Others obviously touched the ark before Uzzah did, especially in placing it on the cart for transportation. But when it seemed clear that the ark would fall off the cart and be damaged, why does God strike Uzzah down for touching the ark to prevent its fall? It seems as though God would rather have had the ark be damaged from falling than to have Uzzah touch it again. Is this the right interpretation of what happened here?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Because people get surprised when they read about it. And for those who, you may remember the story from 1 Chronicles chapter 13. So they're moving the ark, and this is during the time with David, and they're singing and they're very excited about it. And then the ark is on this cart and the oxen, and it's about to fall over, and Uzzah grabs his hand to kind of make sure it doesn't fall. And then it says, God broke out against him. And so the question is, well, what is going on and why was it just Uzzah?
Yeah.
So it is interesting when you look at the story, it has trouble all over it from the beginning because the book of Exodus, if you go back to Exodus chapter 25, of course, you've got the description of the Ark of the Covenant. It's the most holy object, right? So
right.
This is where, the Lord would appear. It's in the Holy of Holies. So it's the most holy object. It had hooks on it for poles. Why do you have poles? So that you never have to touch it, right? You kind of hook the poles into it. And so then if you look in then the book of Numbers, in those opening chapters, when the tribes are about to leave, it gives a description about how this is meant to be moved. And so what happens is, as the tribes of the Levites are moving it, they are to put animal skin over the object. Like, they're not even touching it, they're just covering it. And then they're to put that expensive royal blue fabric. Now, all the other objects have the blue fabric and then the skin on the top. So think of that when you're moving it, it's the only one that has the beautiful blue fabric, right? So that's signal that it's most holy. But then they're meant to kind of thread the poles through it. These are the Levites, so that you don't touch it. And then they carry it on their shoulders. So there's none of that happening here. I mean, that's the first thing. So the great question, why didn't someone else get killed? And that's a great question. Why didn't they?
Right.
So God's already being merciful, because if you look in chapter 15, which is the story when David does bring it to transports it the second time, you notice him getting the Levites. And so there's no record that Uzzah's a Levite. So you've got wrong person. You've got nothing about the poles, about the fabrics and everything else. And you also have the fact that it's on a new cart. Can you see the word new cart there?
Yeah, I've never noticed that.
Yep, the only time that cart is used is when the Philistines move the Ark of the Covenant. So, so the method of transport is also incorrect. So everything is going against this. And even when it says they were celebrating, even there's hints that maybe this was it's not the usual term used. So a little bit too jovial, if you like, not recognizing the sacred moment. So, and then when it says that God breaks out against Uzzah in here and then in 15, it's the same term used when God is at Mount Sinai and he tells the people, don't come close to the mountain lest I break out against you. So this is really an issue of God's holiness and approaching a holy object without being legitimate to do so. So I think it's got everything all over it that is a mistake. And that's why when you come to chapter 15, you're going to see David when he says, when we move it, and he says he called for the priests and the Levites, and he tells them then to consecrate themselves. You know, think of before you handle a holy object, you've got to be consecrated. That's why the high priest and the priest have to wear the holy garments and the washing, because they're dealing with sacred objects. So this is a passage that teaches about God's holiness. And Aaron understood about God's holiness when his sons went into the tabernacle with strange fire and they got killed as well.
Yeah.
And the only way you really see what God's holiness is like, a story like this.
And like you said, it's not so much of why did Uzzah die, but the fact that God had grace and didn't kill everybody. You know, you almost have to, if you think of it in light of his holiness, that's a good way to flip that.
Yeah, I was thinking of that along the same line of that it's actually more of God's mercy as well, because the other time I remember the story is that it's connected to Samuel, and the whole entire episodes in Samuel is where the Philistines are touching it.
That's right.
And they even opened it, and yet they didn't die.
Yeah, and remember when they take it, remember that the Dagon bows down to it. Do you remember that? Love that story. Dagon bowing. I like that because it is in Ekron, and I excavated when I was a student. I was involved in excavation at Ekron. So, and we found a golden snake headpiece. It was the find of the season. I don't mean to boast, but
what a story. Oh my goodness. That's pretty incredible.
An interesting story. Yeah. But anyway, so yeah, these are, and holiness is an important theme in Chronicles, right? Because the Chronicle is probably a Levite, and Levites are important. Worship is important, coming before a holy God, all those themes. And so this again fits theologically with the book as well, to really get people to see, do you realize who you're worshiping, who this God is? He's a holy God, and he needs to be treated with utmost respect and reverence.
Absolutely. All right, well, let me jump us to the second question for this episode. And this question says, I noticed for the first time that the story of David's census takes an unexpected turn in 1 Chronicles 20 versus the version I had read in 2 Samuel. The census ends in 2 Samuel saying David purchased the land for the temple, but in 1 Chronicles it goes on for 9 chapters about David preparing the temple elements before Solomon actually builds it. Why does the author focus so much more time on these details compared to the writer of Samuel?
Yeah, that's a great question. Just a nice, thoughtful question. An attentive reader, right, noticing that. So yeah, the same story, there's some differences, but is recorded in Samuel, and 2 Samuel 24, the end, and then Samuel then moves into the king's narrative, of course, of the king, and it moves then into Solomon, but although there's some tension there with rivals to the throne. So that story then now in Chronicles, you've got chapter 22 all the way through to chapter 29, right? So quite a long section. And this is material that isn't in Kings. And so the question is, why is all that included?
Yeah.
David had thought that he would build the temple. Do you remember that in 2 Samuel 7, 1 Chronicles 17? David had thought, and in the ancient world, it's the greatest honor that you can do for a god. The greatest honor is to build the temple. And temples were built after there was peace in the land. So when David says he wants to build a temple, it is spot on with what you would expect. But remember that that Nathan comes to him, because God comes to him and he says, you're not going to build it, your son's going to build it.
Right.
And what's interesting for me is here we have God saying no to King David, and there's a wonderful prayer that follows with it.
Yeah.
But God has another legacy for David, and you see it in chapters 22 to 29. What do I mean by that? So David thought he would build the temple and would be known for that. But what David actually does is he is establishing worship in Israel. He is, in these chapters, he's going to appoint the Levites, not only those who minister, but he appoints the worship leaders as well. He's establishing the whole sacred kingdom, if you like. He's getting it ready for Solomon, and he's using all of his relationships that he has, the commanders, the people who have been loyal to him. He is going, so you have the reference to the right, but look in chapter 23, look at all the Levites. Chapter 23, the Levites, numbering them, Gershon, Kohath, Merari, the duties of the Levites, the divisions, chapter 24, the division of the priests. Chapter 25, the number and services of musicians. So and then he's got the gatekeepers. So what David is doing, I think it's fascinating. He's coming toward the latter end of his life, and he is using the skills and gifts that God has given him to establish organization of the kingdom so that it's going to be ready for Solomon. But, when you think of it, in the book of Exodus, when the tabernacle has been built, there's no singing afterwards. Have you ever noticed that? All my years teaching the Old Testament, it occurred to me when I was working on Chronicles. There's no worship afterwards. We assume worship has always been part of it. And if you look at the verb to sing in those early chapters, Miriam, of course, after the Exodus,
right?
But worship is David's legacy.
Wow.
And all these chapters, it starts in 1 Chronicles 16, where it says he appoints Levites to thank, to praise God, and to cause to remember. He's the one that he appoints the Levites for all this. And of course that makes sense because David's the musician.
It does.
Right?
Yes.
He's not a temple builder.
Right.
He's the musician. So he's establishing the kingdom. And then you get to the end of 1 Chronicles chapter 21. God gives him the pattern. He's doing everything. He's giving his finances toward the kingdom.
Yeah.
And then another thing that's not in Kings is this incredible prayer of 1 Chronicles chapter 29. And I would just encourage those who are listening to reread that prayer, because it is getting you into the heart of King David, and he's going to say everything has come from you, riches and honor, and he gives all of his resources toward the kingdom. And so in my commentary, I have sections on how do we use the retirement years or the latter years of our lives to establish God's work in the church and his kingdom work. And David's a great example of this because he's relentless in giving his gifts, his administrative gifts, his relationships to secure the kingdom for Solomon. I know that was a long answer, but isn't that beautiful?
That is beautiful. I'm just kind of in awe. I've never noticed that. And I makes me love this even more.
It makes so much sense. It's like David is the one who establishes the worship music culture of Israel.
That's right. And the temple's going to be destroyed, but worship's going to last all through eternity.
Yeah.
Is that beautiful?
Which plays into how, like, whenever Nathan, the Lord through Nathan told him that he's not going to build the temple, but then he goes on to bless him and say, I'm going to do even greater things. And then to play into what you just said, the legacy that he left spanned all the temples.
That's right.
Wow.
And this is again Chronicles, and Chronicles is calling God's people to worship the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to, and 1 Chronicles chapter 16 is another great example because it's picking up this theme of worship. Of course, it's David here, and this is the time when he appoints the Levites.
Mm-hmm.
And verse 4, it says he appointed the Levites as ministers of the ark to celebrate and to thank and to praise the God of Israel. And then there's this beautiful collection of 3 Psalms. It's not in Kings. And this is
Mm.
David, the whole climax of God coming into Jerusalem and the Ark of the Covenant, it ends in worship. And that's the central theme in Chronicles, that God is calling his people to worship him. And there's a mystery in it that
Mm-hmm.
when we as the church are worshiping the Lord, that it's drawing in the nations.
Yeah. Would you say, Dr. Kaminski, that if we have a worship leader listening to this podcast, would you encourage them to really study this section deep? Like, would it benefit them in the ministry that they
Yes.
do at their own church?
Yes. And since writing Chronicles, and I have sections on worship leading
Mm-hmm.
and I worship ministry in some of these chapters, and I have started calling our worship leaders, "Oh, you're a good Levite. That's what you are." So, and there's a whole theology when you think of those who are leading worship. There's a whole theology of it, because remember, Levites from 20 years old upwards are set apart for full-time ministry. They receive the tithe and the
Mm.
blessing from the others, but they're also trained in the Torah.
Mm-hmm.
So and this is an example in 1 Chronicles 16. You read this, and he's going to go through, give thanks to the Lord, sing, remember his covenant that he made with, I
Yeah.
mean, it's historical as well. He's going
Right.
back, covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You promised to give them the land. It's all theology in there.
Mm-hmm.
And um, just beautiful. The theme of worship is like this wonderful melody that reverberates throughout Chronicles.
Mm.
Um, and Levites turn up in all different places singing worship. How
Mm.
lovely is that?
I love it. Love it so much. That is
When you're
great.
about to, when you're about to go out into battle with Jehoshaphat, and who comes out with you? The Levites leading worship.
Mm.
The worshipers. Mm-hmm.
Lovely.
Shows you the power of worship too, and how
Yeah,
important it is in our daily walks with the Lord, you
yeah.
know. Mike, any other thoughts on this one?
I'm just looking at 1 Chronicles 29
Mm,
and David's prayer.
mhm.
It's honestly, we were talking about Jabez in the last episode, and this actually seems to be a much more fuller and much more meaningful prayer.
Yeah.
Beautiful prayer.
It's timeless.
Mm-hmm.
It has such a timeless element to it because it is worshiping the timeless one.
Yeah.
And I love, who am I? That's a famous David saying in verse 14. And who are my people that we should be able to offer so generously? Everything's come from you and your hand. And then verse 15, he's got the theology of land. We are sojourners before you.
Mm-hmm.
Our days are on earth like a shadow. And that's why he uses his financial resources relentlessly
Mm-hmm.
in preparation for the temple.
Mm.
It's just a beautiful prayer.
That is so
Mm.
great. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right, guys, let's jump to a quick break. Let's let all of our listeners sit on that for a minute because
Okay.
that is just it's so good. I want to go back and read through it all now with that lens of worship. I love that. And I want to share that with all the worship leader friends that I have in my
Yes.
life. Tell them to go read that commentary and study First Chronicles. All right, guys, let's jump to a quick commercial break and then we'll come right back. If you're not already reading with us, we'd love to have you start reading today. Every month in the Awakening Bible community, we read a book or several books of the Bible together. Readings are only 1 to 3 chapters a day, 5 days a week, with weekends reserved for catch-up or deeper study. And as you read, we know that you will likely encounter questions, but that's where we come in. Submit your questions at AWKNG.com, and we will do our best to get them answered for you right here on the Ask a Scholar podcast. All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. We are excited to jump into our last two questions with Dr. Kaminski. And this second to last question says, the story of Second Chronicles 30 surprised me primarily to learn that there were still northern tribes that King Hezekiah could reach out for the Passover celebration. I had always heard that the 10 tribes of northern Israel were lost after the Assyrians destroyed that kingdom. Does this mean that not all of the 10 tribes were destroyed or lost? And does that mean today's Jewish people are still composed of not just people from the tribe of Judah and Levi, but also from other tribes?
Great. Yeah, that's another very good question, and clearly someone's been reading the text carefully with that as well. So the passage is really Second Chronicles chapter 30, and this sets the context for King Hezekiah because he's about to celebrate the Passover. And what he does is he wants to, they agree to send a proclamation to the northern tribes to the north, and that's where it says they're going to send it to Ephraim and Manasseh, and he's going to send it inviting them to the Passover. And so this is quite remarkable. One of the reasons why it's remarkable, at the very least, is if you look in Second Chronicles chapter 28, his King Ahaz, just a few years earlier, had been king, and the northern tribes had come and they'd killed thousands in the south. So that in and of itself is just a remarkable act of grace. So that's the first thing. The second thing to be aware of too is the timing of this. 722 BC is when the Assyrians kind of come into that northern kingdom, and they send people into further lands, their own lands. They call it population shifting, we call it, and then foreigners are brought into the north. And so we know that there are still people from the northern tribes in the north, and there are also foreigners living in there. So he then sends his proclamation. Some of the people reject the message, but then there's a group that do come. So that's important to notice. It says, verse 11, some men from Asher, Manasseh, and Zebulun humbled themselves and came to Jerusalem. There's our key verb there. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves.
Yeah.
So that's important. And in fact, all the vocabulary from this key verse in Chronicles, Second Chronicles 7:14, you may have heard of it. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face. This is a commentary on that verse, actually, because all the vocabulary is here. And what you find is it is not one person doing all those actions, but the northerners are humbling themselves. They are turning from their evil ways. They are seeking the Lord. And what happens is Hezekiah prays for them. Hezekiah prays for them and asks God to forgive them in verse 18. And verse 20 says, the Lord heard Hezekiah and healed the people. So the commentary on Second Chronicles 7:14, God doesn't heal land, he heals people, one person at a time. And it's through this invitation of reconciliation. And then we find out at the end, we find out that they are all, here's this theme of worship again in verse 25, all the assembly of Judah rejoiced, and with those from the north of Israel and sojourners. So there's foreigners as well. So this is a picture of a multi-ethnic people of God rejoicing together. And it's interesting, the word there for assembly in Hebrew is kahal. You know what the Greek translation is? Ecclesia.
Oh, wow.
Church.
Wow.
The assembled, because ecclesia simply means assembled people of God, and the Hebrew kahal is used of the sacred assembly when they gather together for worship. So you have a picture of a multi-ethnic people of God rejoicing together.
And that includes the foreigner, the Gentile.
That's right.
Hmm.
So the question about the lost tribes is
Huh.
fascinating because I've always heard that as well. I think it's sort of out there. Uh, and just a couple of quick comments here about it because it's so interesting. We often think that the Old Testament, their people are Jewish, right? And then maybe there's a few foreigners, but um, way back in the book of Genesis, when Jacob has not only sons, but he has grandsons. Remember his grandsons, Ephraim and Manasseh?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They are half Egyptian, right? Because their mother was Egyptian. Joseph's
Yes.
wife was Egyptian.
Yep.
They're half Egyptian, and they
Mm.
become two of the 12 tribes.
Yeah, that is so true.
I mean, so you've got half Egyptians heading up the tribes, and you could look at all kinds of things in the genealogies and chronicles. The tribe of Judah is the most ethnically diverse because foreigners are being incorporated into it
Hmm.
through marriage. That was a
Yeah.
surprise. And so Chronicles is trying to show the vision for the united people of God. Remember the genealogies at the start, all the
Yeah.
nations? So he's going to show times when northerners come to the southern kingdom. So the question is, are the 10 tribes lost? No. They've always been part of the people of God.
Hmm.
And that's why the chronicler, when they go back from exile, he includes Ephraim and Manasseh.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
there's always been, now, is it predominantly Judah? Yes.
Yeah.
But they've always had foreigners. I think it's one of the misinterpretations of the Old Testament to not to see the foreigners in their midst from the very beginning.
Hmm.
Hmm.
All the laws I'm working through the Pentateuch at the moment for a book I'm working on. How many of the laws, and for the foreigner in your midst and the
Yes.
sojourner,
Yep.
all over the place.
Yep.
You're meant to treat them like you treat the native born.
Right. It's all about protecting them, their welfare, all of
That's
that.
right. That's right.
Hmm.
So I think that theology is Chronicles. There's a vision in the genealogies for all the tribes, and now you're seeing some of that in the narratives as well.
Hmm.
And this is a great place for that.
Yeah, really great.
Dr. Kaminski, I'm curious. Another colleague of mine, we've been talking about this before, and he talked about this episode, and that what Hezekiah's prayer seems to be is essentially a bloodless atonement.
That's right.
Like, what are your thoughts on that? Of that they were pretty much doing everything wrong,
That's right.
and yet just from the prayer that Hezekiah prayed, God heard it, and he healed the people, even though there was no real proper, in some sense, atonement because of
That's right.
everything they were doing wrong.
Hmm.
And they're idolaters. There is no legal provision for that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Hezekiah is praying to the Lord, who is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in loving kindness, and who forgives iniquity.
Hmm.
And so this echoes 2 Chronicles chapter 6, Solomon's prayer. If even the foreigner prays to you, and forgiveness is being offered through prayer.
Hmm. Again, the prayer theme that just keeps
Yeah.
to be popping up through this whole
Yeah.
entire two books.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Like it just seems to be like if you actually direct your heart, your posture towards the Creator God, He'll listen to you. He'll answer your prayer.
How
Hmm.
kind of the Lord.
Yeah.
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 Just his kindness. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right, you guys. Well, let's wrap up with this one final question. And this has to do with King Manasseh. The question reads, why do the writers of Kings and Chronicles differ in their assessment of King Manasseh? In 2 Kings chapter 21, verses 16 through 18, he is portrayed as having done no good thing in his life. While in 2 Chronicles 33, it says 12:20. Sorry, I don't know. It's in Chronicles 33. You can give us the exact reference.
Yeah, it's
Um,
chapters 10 to, sorry, 33 verses 10 to 20. Yep.
10 to 20. Okay, sorry, there
Yeah.
was a colon in the question instead of a
Yeah.
dash. Okay, that writer says Manasseh repented and tried to do some good before he died. So talk us through the differences. Was he a good guy? Was he a bad guy? Did he get redeemed at some point? What should we think about
Yeah.
him?
Yeah. So Manasseh's just another great, great character.
Mm-hmm.
He is our worst southern king, no question.
Mm.
So he's the worst one. And the picture that gets painted in the first half of Second Chronicles 33 is really like the account in Kings.
Okay.
It says altars for Baal, Asherim, these host of heaven, he worships them. He places altars in the temple. And verse 6 especially, he made his sons pass through the fire, so child sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Practice witchcraft, divination, sorcery, mediums, and spiritists. So it's about as bad as you can get.
Yeah.
And he has quite a long reign as well. And his sins are going to be quoted by Jeremiah in several places for the reason for the end of the southern kingdom. So that's verse 9. Manasseh misled Judah and Jerusalem to do more evil than the nations around them. I mean, it's a huge statement, the southern kingdom, Judah. So God then is disciplining Manasseh.
Mm-hmm.
God's treatment of the southern kings are different than how he treats the northern kings because of God's covenant with David in 1 Chronicles chapter 17.
Mm.
But anyway, he goes off, and it says he goes off to Babylon with a nose hook, right?
Mm.
We've got an inscription that shows what that's like. But it says, in his distress, in verse 12,
Yeah.
he entreated the Lord.
Mm.
And he humbled himself.
Another time.
If my people who are called by my
Yeah.
name will humble themselves and pray. And he humbled himself greatly before the God of his fathers. And I love verse 13. When he prayed, God was moved by his entreaty. I mean, is that the character of the Lord? We've
Yeah.
talked about it with prayer. After all the things that he's done, including child sacrifice, he is the worst of kings, and he has led Israel, Judah astray. And yet, not only he prays and God responds to his prayer, and God restores him back to Jerusalem and to his kingdom. And then it says, Manasseh knew that the Lord was God through answered prayer. And then what you find is he starts to remove some of the foreign gods. So there are some positive things that are not recorded in Kings, but we do know that some of the idolatrous practices remain because you see that with his son, who doesn't humble himself and he keeps it going. And then it's only when you come to Josiah that you get the full eradication of idolatry.
Yeah.
But Manasseh is such a great character because scholars have said he really gives hope for the post-exilic community because they're going into Babylon for their unfaithfulness. And what's the message? If God can hear Manasseh's prayer, he can hear your prayer as well.
Yeah.
Right? So it's a great word of hope, actually. And what does Daniel do when he goes into exile? Prayer of confession. And so I think, and I'd love to see it because of the character of God that's shown here,
Yeah.
that he immediately responds to him and brings restoration.
And I love the reminder that it gives us, like, regardless of whoever you are that's listening today, no matter what you've done, if you humble yourself, the Lord responds. Like I mean, just such a
Mm-hmm.
powerful notion that think of everything, like you said, he was the worst of the worst. He did the worst crimes, the worst of everything. So no
Yeah.
matter what you've done, if you humble yourself and pray, the Lord will be there to receive you. It's just so, it's so beautiful.
Isn't that lovely?
Mhm.
And his father was Hezekiah, and so in
Yeah.
some sense he had a model
Yeah,
Yeah.
of what humility ought to look like.
that's so
Yeah.
true.
It really is just it always has struck me as just amazing of what in the world prevented him from going down a path of just hardening his heart even further
Yeah.
versus doing what he did.
Yeah.
Because the amount of pride at that point needing
Yeah.
to swallow, and
And
yet
look,
he did it.
sometimes God uses, we need to remember that, and for listeners, if they've got a family member who's going through a difficult time,
Hmm.
sometimes God uses the prodigal seasons in life
Yeah.
to draw people back to himself. And that language of humbling is used of a person humbling themselves, but God can also humble someone. And
Yeah, it's
so,
true.
so he's kind of bringing Manasseh to his knees out of his mercy. And
Hmm.
sometimes God can do that in people's lives where we think of the prodigal son and so on. It takes these difficult circumstances. And there's a great book by Christopher Yuan called Out of a Far Country, which
Mm.
is all about a prodigal. And it's while he's in prison that he meets the Lord.
Mm.
And wonderful story if listeners haven't read it. But it reminds me, Manasseh's, God's there to hear his prayer. I
Yeah,
mean, how lovely is that?
it's beautiful, truly. Well, it has been a joy to have you with us. I'm so grateful for your wisdom and to learn all these beautiful things about this book that we've probably many of the listeners have never thought of, never seen. I know that I hadn't seen before, so I'm very grateful for that. And listeners, I want to encourage you, if you didn't listen to the first episode, definitely go and do that. But then we're going to also paste all of the resources that Dr. Kaminski shared in the first episode, her commentary, her women's Bible study, the project. Tell us a little bit though about the casket empty real quick. Just
Casket Empty,
repeat that
yes.
really quick.
Yeah, so the Casket Empty project is, you can find out more at casketempty.com, but Casket Empty is an acronym to help you learn the Bible. And really, I'm keen to help people see this larger redemptive narrative. Oh, look, you have Casket Empty there. So there's an Old Testament and New Testament timeline. There's Bible studies. There is a study guide. And I do seminars in churches as well and retreats. And really, it's a visual timeline to help you see the big picture of the story of the Bible and really
Mm.
see each section of this storyline is leading to Jesus. And so
Mhm.
Casket Empty is an acronym. Casket stands for the Old Testament. Empty stands for the New Testament, and you'll have to listen to the first episode to get the acronym. But Casket Empty points to the death and resurrection of Jesus as the center of the biblical story.
Mhm. So awesome. I love it so much. Well, that is so great. Thank you so much for joining us for these 2 episodes. We hope that we get to encounter you at some point in the future, whether it's with a course or another episode or something. Let us leave with one final fun question. And I'm curious if you're going to say the book of Chronicles or not. But the question is, if you had to choose one book of the Bible to teach from for 1 year straight, what would it be?
Oh, that's just an impossible question. So Chronicles would, I love the book of Genesis as well. Chronicles would definitely have to be right up there.
Yeah.
Although I'm in Leviticus right now, so
Wow.
that's another book that these books need to be reclaimed for the church.
Yes. Amen to that.
And that's one of my passions with Chronicles because it's beautiful material, and so I probably would do Chronicles.
Awesome. Well, I definitely think that you could do it for sure with the commentary that you've written for all the nuggets that you've shared with us. I would definitely listen to that. So thank you
Great.
so very much. It's been an honor.
It's great to be with you. Thanks for inviting me.
Awesome. And everybody listening, thank you for joining us. Remember to like, share, subscribe, leave us a review, and join us right back here next month as we cover more questions on new books of the Bible. If you're enjoying the Ask a Scholar podcast, click follow on your podcast listening app to subscribe. Want to help further our mission? Consider becoming a monthly partner at AWKNG.com and help us make an impact in the lives of others all around the world as we work to make biblical understanding accessible to all with no exceptions. Join us next time as we get more of your Bible questions answered. And don't forget to visit AWKNG.com to engage in all our biblical resources that we offer.